I'm Charlotte and this is Deborah Tries to Read, and I'm filming now my 2018 books of the year. Very exciting. I'm even more excited just to be back in the shed and filming because after Christmas, which was lovely, we all caught the most horrible cold, and I'm eternally grateful that it was a cold and not anything more disgusting. But it was a bad one, and I've only just been able to talk properly today. And poor little Idris is at least a day behind me, so he's just full of it. And has been literally dragged, kicking and screaming away from me because when he's ill, he's like a shadow of me. So yeah, I'm really excited to be away and in here and talking about books. And what a year it's been. This is my first year on BookTube. I joined in July, so only 6 months. So it's a weird roundup for me because it's not really a full year. And I've made some notes. I now have my own little black book that I do my BookTube planning in. I need to be more like Doris, basically, and just plan things, because previously it's just all been on the hop. But I've been making a list of all the books I've read. And before I started on BookTube, I'd read 5 books. That's 5 books in 6 months. That's surprising even to me that I'd read the 5, because I felt like I hadn't read any that year. But actually, when I looked back, I had read 5. A couple of those were really tinsy books, more like essays. I read the Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, I think We Are All Feminists, things like that, you know. So only 5, but then I started on BookTube, and this is just really quite insane. I then went on, in the end, to read 49 books in total. So, I mean, that's just a huge amount of books for 6 months. For me, I know that other booktubers have read like ridiculous amounts more than that, and that's great. But when you consider that I'd gone with a start of 5, at the very most I was going to end up with 10. But what I did was I more or less read 50 books. And I'm still searching my brain to try and think of a book that I've forgotten to take it up to 50. Yeah, and I can just say now that nothing has changed in my circumstances. So I'm still tired. I'm still a mama. What it is I've focused in on my reading, and I've made it more of a priority. So it made me think a little bit of Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventures, when she talked about how she doesn't like it when people sort of say, oh, well, how do you read so much? And there's a kind of air of accusation there that you must have loads of time, or you maybe even a bit lazy, and just maybe you leave your house. I mean, by all means leave your house, go to pot, but yeah, there's a level of accusation in there. And actually, I am absolutely the proof of the pudding that really what it is prioritizing, because I didn't have an aim. I'd lost myself as a reader. You know, don't forget, I've been at university for 10 years. So I'd been reading a lot, but I've not been reading for pleasure, apart from here, there, and, you know, not consistently. So really the last 6 months, I found myself again as a reader, which is amazing. And I've done some breakdown of like looking at how many fiction books and how many non-fiction books I read in that year. So in the last sort of year, we shall call it, even though it was mostly 6 months, I read 28 fiction books and 21 non-fiction. And I think that's a pretty good spread. It's not quite 50-50, but I don't think that's too bad. Earlier on in sort of July, August, September, I was trying really hard to do one and then the other, because I know that I'm drawn towards fiction. I think a lot of you will probably know what I mean when I say that. Fiction books are easier to get into. They've got stronger plot lines. They're meant to grab you. Fiction, especially depending on what you pick up. You know, if you're reading a book about ISIS, that's going to be a tricky read. That's not going to be the thing you want to read before you go to bed at night necessarily. So I was pretty chuffed with that. So out of the more or less 50, I have chosen 2 books for my non-fiction favourites, and I tried to pick 3, but I've had to put 4. I've had to put an honourable mention in because there were just too many great ones. My top book, I don't know, should I do it in the other way? Okay, my second top book, so nearly for non-fiction, probably won't surprise you that it's Michelle Obama's Becoming. I'm sure it's made it to the top of lots of other lists this year. Loads of reasons why I love it. One, it's just iconic. Her take on what happened to her and her husband and her family when they entered the White House is just, it's unique. And she told it in a way that had so much feeling, so much intelligence, so much, so, you know, she really self-reflects and calls herself up on things she did wrong. Her voice is just amazing anyway. You love her from the minute she starts speaking, and she's quite open about how she could be a bit of a brat when she was younger and stuff like that. I just loved it. And my favourite non-fiction book of the year, which I have seen top a lot of the charts, so please don't feel the pressure to read it, because when you feel pressure to read a book, if you're anything like me, you don't read it. But this is so good. It's Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Reni Eddo-Lodge. And I'm so glad I picked it up at the beginning of my YouTubing-ness, because if I'd waited, I think I would have felt, like I say, this contrary urge to resist what everyone else was doing. And I'm just better off for having read it. It'll give you tons of tips on how to deal with racists. It will expose your own inner racism that you've probably not even acknowledged. And just generally, it'll just do you good to read it. So those are my two non-fiction. Honourable mention in the fictions, because I couldn't leave her out, but I couldn't quite put her to the top, was Lucia Bullen's A Manual for Cleaning Women. These are a collection of short stories. I absolutely love them. They read more like autobiography than they do fiction. And they, even though they're short stories, they all kind of tie in together. They all tell the story of what it was to be Lucia Bullen, which was pretty dramatic. Yeah, I loved it. Everything about her voice, just brilliant. Third, this was a tricky one to choose. It might surprise you. If you didn't watch my channel earlier on, you won't have heard me talk about this, because this is one of the first books I read. And this is Sight by Jessie Greengrass. It's got an amazing cover, although it does look kind of vampire-y to me. I think I said that before. It sounds like a really weird mix, but it's about a mother who is contemplating her unborn child. She has a child and she's pregnant for a second time. She's contemplating what it is to be a mother to both children, born and unborn. She's also contemplating the death of her mother. She's contemplating her relationship with her psychoanalyst grandmother. And then interspersed between those things, which seems impossible in a book this small, are... oh, can you hear that beep? I hope not. It's a lorry reversing on our road. Interspersed between then are various points in history where science has sort of made a big change. So you've got the man who invented the X-ray and how he came about it. And it's told... It's been about, like I say, about 6 months since I've... read it. It's told in a kind of biography way. She doesn't put herself in like this novelistic sort of position. It's told, you know, you actually lose yourself in some of these stories and actually think, God, what am I reading? You know, am I reading a fiction book? What is this? It's covers things that when you actually look at the book as a whole, all of those choices that she's made to pick those particular scientific sort of revolutions, if you will, they all make sense. So you've got person who invented the X-ray, you've got Freud, you've got the artist who was one of the first artists to draw human beings anatomically, and he drew I think is how she sort of differentiates it. He drew the first pregnant woman with virtually a full-term baby. So obviously he drew her from life, you know, after she died in childbirth, and it's graphic, the description, but it's really visceral and integral to the plot. So I loved it. Also, as an aside, and I didn't mention it in my review video, and I was so mad at myself for not mentioning it, her description of what it's like to have a migraine is just like the most uncanny and amazing thing I've read in years. I've had migraines since I was 18, and just the description of them is... I don't think I'll ever read anything that tops it. And it sounds like a weird thing to draw out, but when you have a chronic illness of any kind, I think you just find it dominates your life so much behind the scenes that you can't talk about it all the time. Otherwise, you just bore people to tears. So to actually hear somebody really intelligently explain what it's like to have that particular illness, amazing. And now for the top two, and it was so difficult to pull these apart. The one that I'm going to put at number 2 is one I've just read. And I kind of wish I'd had time for the dust to settle, because I really do feel so strongly about the two. It was a struggle to pick one. I haven't done a full review of it yet, but this is Tirzah and the Prince of Crows by Deborah K. Davies. Please ignore the garish cover and just pretend I'm talking about something more beautiful. Maybe I'll, I've got all my notes in here, look. No, the inside underneath is just as horrible. Yes, this was a buddy read that I've done in the last month with Mercedes of Mercy Reads. She's just finishing off the book, so I'm not going to give a full review here, but I will say that it was amazing. It's to give you a sort of brief sort of what it says on the dust jacket type synopsis. It's about a young girl called Tirzah who's about 16. Tirzah, we're not sure. I think maybe on reflection we think Tirzah. She's 16 going on 17 and yet is completely clueless about life. She's growing up in the 70s in Wales. She's from a very, very staunchly religious chapel going community. She's finds herself at the odd one out amongst all of her, well, amongst her peers, sort of, but definitely amongst her family. Her family always sort of say that she's the odd one out. She has this, the crux of how she is special is she has this ability to transfer herself outside of her mind and her body and put herself somewhere in nature. So it might be in the middle of a forest, it might be at the top of a mountain, it might be in the tiny crack in a wall where she can see a hole that looks like a cave and she becomes like a little, like a borrower going in and exploring, and she'll, you know, do everything and feel everything that she imagines that little tiny person would do. She floats up in the sky and flies like a bird. She does all of these things when she's trying to get away from the reality of what's in front of her. The story itself, again, I'll do a full review video. The story itself is one of self-discovery, of love, growing up. Massive bit of it is about growing up. It's just amazing. Every part of it will just make you disappear somewhere else. Really and truly just grab you. And yeah, I'll be talking about it again when I do my proper vlog video of what I've read in the last week. Number 1, also set in the 70s, not in Wales but in Ireland. It is Milkman by Anna Burns, and I haven't seen it top anybody else's 2018 reads yet. I don't know whether that's because I've been watching the wrong videos. I don't know if it's as popular over the pond as it is here in the UK, but I was fully expecting this to be present in a lot of things and I didn't see it. So I encourage you so much to read this book. The voice in the book is quite unusual, and that's the whole selling point. Very much like Tirzah. It's written in a way that the actual narrative is the thing, you know, it's the thing that drives it and makes it amazing. The voice of the main character, whose name we do not know, is hilariously funny, depressingly bitter and bleak and just awful, and also deeply intelligent. She's just amazing, and she's, you know, she's walking around 70s Ireland in the heart of the sort of period of the Troubles with her head in 19th century fiction, literally. Ooh, there's a flying thing. The shed's coming alive. Oh dear, I shouldn't have put the heater on. She's walking around in this awful sort of time with her head literally buried in like George Eliot and what have you, trying to pretend none of it's happening. But unfortunately, she starts to become very subtly but very definitely stalked by an older man who's probably part of some militia group, probably the IRA, but although it's never named, and she's dragged into the reality of her society. It's awesome. Just, yeah, I don't know how she does it. Writers like that, they were just meant to be. So I loved it. It is my read of the year, and I've loved reading all these books, and I've equally loved coming here and talking about all these books with all of you. So if any of you have read any of these books, or if you're tempted to read them now I've mentioned them, or if you just want to tell me what your books of the year were, I would love you to write in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching and subscribing. I can't believe, I think I'm over 600 followers now, which is just insane. And yes, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's watched, and especially thank you to people who've commented, although commenting is hard if you're nervous. So thank you to all those of you who want to comment, but you just don't feel you can. I'm on Instagram as well. I'll put the link under the video. So if you ever just want to send me private message to say anything about any of the videos and what we've been talking about, then do that. You don't have to put it in the public domain if you don't want to. Anxiety sucks, and sometimes that's how it presents itself. So yes, but just to everybody, I hope you have a wonderful New Year's Eve. I will be in bed at 10 after 1 glass of Prosecco, and I'll probably be drunk. So that's what I'm going to do. And I will see you in 2019. Bye.